Hello everyone. So today we will look at the concept of Trennbare Verben in German. So Trennbare verbs means separable verbs in German. So we will look at how they are used and then what is the sentence structure, and we will look at some examples also later and try to understand the concept. So you already know that we have regular verbs in German and then irregular verbs also, right? And then for all these verbs we have the conjugation rules, that how the verbs are conjugated according to the subject. For example, we have a verb called common, right, which means to come. So if I do the conjugation of this verb, I have to do the conjugation to the stem form, which is com. You remove the en and then the remaining is the stem form, right? So it will be ish, comma, du, kommst, sie, es kommt, wir kommen. Then we have ihr kommt, and then sie kommen, right? So now we have the conjugation rules for this. So it's ish comma, you add an e, du kommst, st, sie es kommt, wir kommen, ihr kommt, and then sie kommen. So these are the conjugation for regular verbs, right? Now we have a verb made from this verb is called uncommon, right? So you can see there is a prefix added to this verb, which is un, and then we have the main verb common, right? So now what you can do is this word can be conjugated, and then you can separate somewhere here. You can remove the prefix and then conjugate the main verb as you do for the normal verb as in below, and then you remove the un and put it at the end of the sentence. So for example, let's look at one simple ish, comma, heute. So which means I am coming today or I come today, right? So this is I did while using the word common, right? Now I want to use the verb uncommon, which means to arrive, right? And then I want to say I arrive today, that I arrive at the station or I arrive in the city. So I want to say I arrive today. So then in that case I will use this verb ish. Then we can remove the prefix from this verb and the conjugate the main verb. So ish, comma, then I conjugated the comma, and then heute ab. So the prefix goes at the end of the sentence, right? So I did the conjugation as before, and then the prefix of this uncommon verb which I used, it goes at the end, right? So now we can also look at another example. Like suppose we have the irregular verb now, fahren, right? Fahren is to drive, right? And then we can do the conjugation, and then you already know for the irregular verbs we have a special conjugation for do and as in between. So a goes to a umlaut, right? This is for irregular verbs. And then we also have e going to I, and e goes to ie for other verbs in the category of irregular verbs. But here we look at fahren, right? So now I will conjugate fahren. So ich fahre, du fährst, right? So I already have the normal conjugation and then the a umlaut conjugation. Du fährst, er, sie, es fährt, Wir fahren, ihr fahrt, and sie fahren, right? So we only have the umlaut in the do and as case in the case of irregular verbs, right? Now we also have a verb with a prefix in this one, which is abfahren, right? And this means to depart, like when a train departs from somewhere. So abfahren, right? And then we have a prefix here, ab, again, right? But now our fahren is an irregular verb, which you know from above, but this together is a Trennbare verb because it has a prefix in them, right? So uncommon and abfahren are the example of those. So now I will make a sentence with this, right? So let's do the sentence. So der Zug fährt heute. So this is from the first that the train will drive today, right? So now I can do with abfahren also, that der Zug fährt um 6 Uhr ab. So which means that the train will depart at 6 6 a.m., right? Now you can see I have the same conjugation of the fahren in the same way of the subject, and we follow the same rule, but the prefix goes at the end of the sentence, right? So when you so the special features of the Trennbare verb is it has a prefix plus verb, right? So the examples we saw was ab fahren, which became from ab plus fahren, and then you have uncommon, which became from un plus common, right? Then if you have a subject structure, sentence structure, and then you have a subject, and if you have a Trennbare verb, then you have main verb here, which will be conjugated and at second position, then information, then object, and then the prefix, and the prefix comes at the end for such a structure, a sentence structure with Trennbare verb, right? Now when you have normal verb, so you don't have a prefix at the end, and then it's the normal sentence structure with subject, verb, and object. When you have a Trennbare verb, the prefix goes at the end, as we saw in the upper example. And then the verb which is left, it could be regular and irregular. So for example, we had common, then I conjugated common accordingly, and to the rule of conjugation. And then in the other one I had fahren, which is an irregular verb, so I conjugated the fahren verb accordingly with the same rules, right? So you have to remember that once the prefix at the end, what is the left of the verb is conjugated with the original rule, right? So these are Trennbare verbs, right? Now also not necessarily that the meaning of the verb, if you add a prefix, is always going to be because of the prefix and its change. So for example, it's not necessary that fahren and then up fahren has in this case was related to something foreign, but not necessarily it will always be related to foreign, right? But here it is true, but you will find some verbs where you added, for example, we can use an example, common, and then you can have myth common, right? And in this one, you had common to come, and myth common is means to to come along, right? To come along. So it has the same meaning derivated from the common. Common is to come, right? And myth is usually used for to add something, right? Myth something. So if you add myth common, that you are coming along, right? But not necessarily for all the examples. The meanings goes along with the main verb in this Trennbare verb, right? So you have to keep an eye for it. But usually it's something related to the prefix meaning plus the main verb meaning. So you can identify also the Trennbare verbs with some examples of the prefixes. For example, you have ab, right? Ab. So we saw above abfahren, or abfahren. Abnehmen is also a Trennbare verb, and then you separate on the prefix, and then you conjugate nehme. So nehmen will be ich nehme, du nimmst, irregular verb, and then ab goes at the end. Then you have an, we did uncommon, right? Then you have auf, auffüllen, to fill something. Then again, this is here. uh, so this is uncommon, right? And so on. So these are the identifiers for Trennbare verbs with these prefixes, and then you can identify if the verbs are starting with these prefixes, then you have to follow the rules of Trennbare verb. So you conjugate the main verb in the Trennbare and put the prefix at the end of the sentence, right? So most of the verbs with these identifiers, you can know that this is a Trennbare verb. So let's look at some examples in the sentence, and then we try to follow the rule of the Trennbare verb and see how we can do it or not. So first is einsteigen, right? Ich dash an der Station Western in die U6 dash, right? So ich steige, and then at the end prefix ein, right? So we will conjugate this steigen verb, and then we can conjugate and then put the prefix at the end, right? Then umsteigen an der Station Hauptwache steige ich und nehme die U1, right? So then here the sentence finished. So this is the end of the sentence, and then we put the prefix here. Aussteigen. Then here's this one. Am Südbahnhof steige ich aus. Ankommen. Similarly, pünktlich 8 Uhr komme ich im Büro an. Aufmachen. Es ist sehr warm. Ich mache das Fenster auf. Right? Reinkommen. Mein Kollege kommt rein und sagt zumachen. Es ist kalt hier. Dash. Sie doch das Fenster. Dash. So machen Sie doch das Fenster zu. Zumachen. Ich mache das Fenster wieder zu und fange mit der Arbeit an. Right? So maybe you understand. So I conjugated the main verbs in the Trennbare: fangen, machen, kommen, according to the subject. Yeah. And then, for example, ich hier, then mein Kollege, yeah, then sie, and so on. And then I put the prefixes at the end of the sentence, right? So that's how Trennbare verb works. So you will have a prefix to the verb plus the verb. So, and then in the sentence you put the prefix at the end, right? Subject plus verb. You conjugate the verb, and it will always be at the second position, object, and then you have the prefix here. So that's how you make the sentences with the Trennbare verbs. And then the verb, whatever is in the main, it could be regular verb, regelmäßige, irregular verb, un, un regelmäßiger verb, then you have to conjugate them accordingly and follow the rule. Right. So if you have any doubt, you can write in the comment, and if you have any suggestion of the topic, if it is not clear, then you can ask. Maybe I try to explain in the comment section, or I can make another video, or we can discuss in the comment section. Till then, bye.